Hello and welcome, history buffs. My name is Nick Hodges and I am so excited to present to you a very special episode celebrating one of the greatest television series of all time, Game of Thrones. Now, whether you know it or not, this is a fantasy epic that lives and breathes history, where many of its most iconic creations can find its roots embedded in our own past. Even the locations they shoot in are brimming with history. Sometimes I'm not even sure if the creators of the series are aware of how much of it seeps into Game of Thrones. For example, what's up with that painting? Are those cannons? Are those ships firing cannons? But in any case, I'm here to talk today about my favourite historical inspirations that may have helped conceive the lore behind the show. Whether they're true or not is up for debate, but they're certainly fun to think about. This is Game of Thrones. Now, I think we can all agree that the world of Game of Thrones is, without a doubt, based on medieval Europe, but its biggest inspiration behind the main setting of the story, Westeros, lies with the British Isles. But instead of them being a group of small islands, they have been reshaped as a single great continent. So let's start with this most identifiable landmark, the Wall. Made entirely of ice, its colossal size is measured as 700 feet high and stretches for 300 miles. Currently defended by the Night's Watch, it was originally built by the first men 8,000 years ago and was infused with magic by the Children of the Forest, along with help from some very friendly giants of course. Its original purpose was to defend the Seven Kingdoms against the return of the White Walkers. Now it only really serves as a sort of reformed penal colony and a weak border defense against the wildlings. This wall can be attributed to the real-life Hadrian's Wall. Built by the Romans in the north of England in the 2nd century, it stood as the furthest northern frontier of the Roman Empire. It sprawled across the country for 74 miles and reached 15 feet high. Although much smaller than the Westerosi Wall, it's still pretty impressive, and its purpose for being built was also to defend its southern lands against the barbaric tribes north of the wall called the Picts. So if we head south of the wall, we have the famous Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. We have the Kingdom of the North, the Kingdom of the Mountain and the Vale, the Kingdom of the Isle and the Rivers, the Kingdom of the Rock, the Kingdom of the Stormlands, the Kingdom of the Reach, and the Principality of Dorne. The conception of these 7 kingdoms can be traced back to the 7 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of mainland Britain in the early Middle Ages. So there we have the kingdoms of Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Wessex, Sussex, and Kent. In fact, you can go a step further and see comparisons between the Anglo-Saxons and their Westerosi counterpart, the Andals. Their conquest of the Celts and the First Men is almost unparalleled, as they both became the dominant force in the region before being conquered themselves by the Normans and the Targaryens. Now, you could say that there is further evidence of Westeros being based on the British Isles due to its similar regional accents, like with the Starks having northern accents and the Lannisters speaking with southern accents, but to be perfectly honest, this show is rather inconsistent when it comes to specific accents for specific characters. Like, don't you think it's weird that Sir Davos and Gendry both come from Flea Bottom, and yet Sir Davos has an Irish accent and Gendry has a southern English accent?
I was born in Flea Bottom, just like you.
Sure you were.
And the less said about Littlefinger's accent, the better.
Strictly speaking, such a thing would not be in accordance with the king's laws.
Strictly speaking.
Are you hurt, my lady? Good, good. I'm sure you've had quite a fright. Rest easy. The worst is past.
So leaving Westeros, we have the vast continent of Essos, which is a completely different story. Rather than being based on any one society, it seems to be more of a melting pot of different cultures. For example, in the west there are elements of southern Europe with the 9 free cities of Braavos, Lorath, Lys, Myr, Norvos, Pentos, Koha, Tyrosh, and Volantis. They are clearly based on the Italian city-states between the 9th and the 15th century. These include Venice, Milan, Florence, Genoa, Pisa, Siena, Lucca, Cremona, and etc. They were all independently governed metropolises with vast amounts of wealth and power due to their networks of trade and commerce. Now here's a fun fact. Did you know that the Titan of Braavos is based on the real-life Colossus of Rhodes? Built in the likeness of the sun god Helios in ancient Greece, this enormous statue is said to have stood directly over the harbour entrance at 100 feet high. So heading even further east, you get the Dothraki Sea, home of the extremely violent nomadic warriors, the Dothraki, who live, fight and die on the horse. Obviously, the Dothraki Sea is heavily influenced on the ancient steppe, home to an even more dangerous horse warrior culture, the Mongols, who once conquered the single largest continuous land empire the world has ever seen. And when you finally get down to Meereen, Yunkai, Astapor and Karth, it's a little harder to pinpoint their historical origins. I mean, personally, I see elements of Constantinople, Egypt and India with their incredible architecture, enormous wealth and their systems of slavery. But there's such a mishmash of different cultures that they're pretty unrecognizable from whatever societies they might have been based on originally. As we all know, the world of Game of Thrones has a pretty funky pattern of seasonal and climate changes, where summers and winters can last for a few years, sometimes even a decade.
The Raven arrived from the Citadel this morning, Your Grace. The Conclave has met, considered reports from maesters all over the Seven Kingdoms, and declared this great summer done. At last. The longest summer in living memory.
The peasants say a long summer means an even longer winter.
A winter that we're still waiting for.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
And winter is coming!
Winter is coming. Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
And winter is coming.
When? So you might think that the extreme length of these seasons is work of brilliant fiction, and they are, but these two are loosely based on our own history. In regards to the long summer from 900 to 1300 AD, there is a theory that much of our northern hemisphere experienced a rise in global temperatures known as the medieval warm period. Through studying of historical records of harvests and evidence provided by tree rings and ice cores, there is proof that Europe was considerably warmer back then. Summers were extremely pleasant and winters were mild, meaning that harvest yields were abundant, and the fact that they were able to grow grapes in medieval England and could successfully produce their own wine does strengthen this theory a little bit. I mean, you have to admit, England isn't exactly world famous for its amazing wine selection now, is it?
Mr. Porter, what's your wine selection? Oh, we got red or white. A pint of lager, please.
Yeah, Roy.
So that takes care of the long summer, but what about the long winter? Well, right after 400 years of the medieval warm period, temperatures dropped drastically in what would later be known as the Little Ice Age, and this lasted from around 1300 to around 1850. Now, even though it's called the Little Ice Age, that doesn't mean that the whole world was covered in snow, but it was still pretty morbid in Europe during the late Middle Ages. Previous pleasant conditions were replaced by terribly cold winters to wet summers that led to bad harvests to of course famine, and the scarcity of these natural resources were quickly followed by war. Now, whether these are all actually related to historical climate changes is up for debate, as is unfortunately any discussion on climate change at all. However, I think it's a good chance that George R.R. Martin picked up on all of this and incorporated it into Game of Thrones. Now, what's there not to love about Valyrian steel? It's lighter and more durable than regular steel, it can be reforged and shaped into new weapons, it's the sharpest sword in the known world, and it never loses its edge.
Oh, careful, Your Grace. Nothing cuts like Valyrian steel.
So they say.
The process of making it, however, has been lost to time.
No one's made a Valyrian steel sword since the Doom of Valyria.
Which means it's very rare and very valuable, and everyone wants one.
Valyrian steel. I always wanted some Valyrian steel.
This all sounds really similar to another lost sword of our time, Damascus steel. Its remarkable qualities became legendary throughout Western Europe when it was first encountered during the First Crusade. This sword was vastly superior to anything the Europeans had. It was also durable and retained its edge through many battles, and the sharpness of its blade was reputed to be able to slice a feather in midair. During the Middle Ages, it was the perfect sword. Like in the show, it was also very rare in Western Europe, and they had no idea how to make it. Eventually, it also became a lost technology, disappearing sometime around the 18th century. Like the name suggests, Damascus steel was crafted in Syria, but we now know that its raw material was made out of wood steel from India. For one reason or another, the breakdown in trade between India and the Middle East ceased the necessary supplies needed to make Damascus steel, and so did the knowledge required in making it. Now let's talk about the greatest weapon in Westeros, Wildfire.
Take care, my lord.
I remember reading an old sailor's proverb. Piss on wildfire and your cock burns off.
Oh, no, I have not conducted this experiment. It could well be true. The substance burns so hot, it melts wood, stone, even steel. And, of course, flesh. The substance burns so hot, it melts flesh like tallow.
In the show, Wildfire is a highly unstable and combustible material crafted by the Targaryen dynasty as a powerful weapon to replace the loss of their dragons. In Season 2, we get to see how effective this weapon is during the Battle of Blackwater Bay.
Mathas! Get down!
This epic fantasy creation from George R.R. Martin is clearly based on Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's greatest weapon. The method of how it was made was its closest guarded secret, and as a result has been lost after the Empire fell. We do know though that it was extensively used in land and naval battles, and at times was projected at their enemies with a primitive version of a flamethrower. Greek fire can be described in a form similar to napalm. It was a substance that tended to stick to whatever it was burning at extremely high temperatures. Unless you knew exactly what you were doing, it was almost impossible to put out if you were on the receiving end.
So, you betrayed me. You promised me Greek fire, and this is all I get.
Lord Oliver.
I should have had you hung,
Lord
drawn,
Oliver.
what?
With your permission, my lord. For more water, for more fire.
Good. Better. My God, you are a magician, not a magister. I want this for every cannon. How many men will you need? 20. 20? Give this man 20 men immediately.
As you wish, my lord.
It's pretty clear why the Byzantines kept it such a secret. This was literally a weapon of mass destruction during the Middle Ages. The only way it could be put out was with sand, vinegar, and, if you could stomach it, urine. Kind of puts things in perspective when Tyrion says,
Piss on wildfire and your cock burns off.
I think that we can all agree that the Red Wedding episode has to be the most jaw-dropping episode in television history. The hilarious reaction montages you can find on YouTube really does paint a picture of how this genuinely shocked people.
Oh! No, 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 no!
Oh, no. Oh, shit. Oh.
What? What the fuck is happening?
Holy shit.
Yet once again does the genius of George R.R. Martin take a page from history that inspired this horrific massacre. This was actually loosely based on the equally shocking and infamous Glencoe massacre that took place in the Highlands of Scotland. In the late 17th century, Britain was heavily divided by religious turmoil. King James VII of Scotland and II of England made attempts to re-establish Catholicism as Britain's official faith. However, this did not go down well, as Britain was mostly a Protestant country, and they turned towards Holland to place William of Orange, a Protestant monarch, on the throne instead. After many battles, King James was forced to flee in exile to France. It was then that King William offered assurances to the heavily Catholic Highlanders who had fought against him that they would be exempt from reprisals if they swore an allegiance to him. His proclamation stated that they had 1 year to do so, otherwise they would be met with the full extremity of the law. Now, the Highlanders were hoping beyond hope that before this deadline passed, King James would return at the head of a French armada to invade Britain so that they could continue the fight. And so they delayed for as long as possible, but when it started looking like King James wouldn't return in time, more and more of the clans started swearing their allegiance to King William. Now, I am positive that every single one of these oaths would only hold out if James never returned, but it did help keep the peace between the clans. The MacDonald clan delayed the longest, and Alistair MacLean, the chief of Glencoe, waited until the last possible moment before setting out on his long journey to swear his clan's oath in front of a magistrate in Inverary. He arrived 2 days late, but was eventually allowed to sign his oath in the end. Thinking that he and his clan was in the clear, MacLean relaxed and went back to Glencoe. Unfortunately, he couldn't have been more wrong. Sir John Dalrymple, the Secretary of State over Scotland, wanted to make an example out of these rebellious and troublesome Highlanders, and this marked the fate of the MacDonalds of Glencoe. It was then that over 100 soldiers were dispatched from Fort William to Glencoe, and when confronted by the MacDonalds, they stated that they were only looking for brief shelter before moving on to the neighbouring clan for not paying their taxes. The MacDonalds then let their guard down and became gracious hosts to their new guests. This is because ancient Highland laws of hospitality protected both the host and the guest from any harm, once that relationship was sealed with food, drink and a warm bed. The soldiers stayed at the Glencoe settlement for 2 weeks, and then on the 13th of February, 1692, they received their final secret orders.
How can I murder these people in their beds, Lindsay? They are unarmed, and we have been their guests for almost 2 weeks.
Our orders state quite clearly what is to be done, sir.
You are not Highland, Lindsay. You do not understand our ways.
I understand that these people are rebels, and we are soldiers of the king.
We came as friends. They trust us, and now we are ordered to kill them. It betrays every Highland law of hospitality, and it is dishonorable. But I must obey the instructions of my king.
This massacre marked a dark chapter in Scottish history. It didn't do so much to deter the other clans as intended, but instead became a propaganda piece for the Jacobite cause against King William. Today, this atrocity lives on in pop culture through the Red Wedding, and surprisingly through a really upbeat Celtic punk song by the Real Mackenzies.
They came in the night when the men were asleep. This band of our child who snow soft and deep, like murdering foxes among helpless sheep. They slaughtered the house of MacDonald. Oh, crew with the snow that sweeps their gold, and covers the grave MacDonald. Oh, crew with the fool that raped Glencoe, and murdered the house of MacDonald.
Well, that about wraps it up. My name is Nick Hodges, and thanks for watching, History Buffs. And remember, if you like the show, help the channel grow. And let me know in the comments section what was your favourite historical inspiration for Game of Thrones. And of course, what historical movie should I review next? In the meantime, check out the History Buffs Twitter and Facebook pages for new updates. Until then, I'll see you next time.